Time flies.
Welcome to the Anatomy of a Strategy podcast.
Yeah, we're back after a very unexpected hiatus.
What do you mean unexpected? We're on vacation.
Yeah, we still thought we could produce some content.
Yeah.
My name is Tara Hunt.
And this is Carlos Pacheco.
We're back after a little bit of a hiatus, but we do have a lot of really great episodes coming up, including this one. So we're starting off with a doozy, Georgiana Laudi, who is a SaaS marketing expert, and we're going to find out what exactly that means, is going to talk about some really, really crucial parts of marketing a software as a service, B2B kind of business.
Yeah, and it's, I look at SaaS as being on the edge, like really efficient marketing. They make sure that all the money they spend and every tactic they do is really effective. So it's almost like,
they're the geek. They're really marketing geeks.
Yeah.
Marketing
exactly.
geeks. So we love it. We absolutely love it. And we learned a ton talking to Georgiana. She's been doing she's been doing marketing for almost 20 years, but this type of marketing for 10 years, probably since the inception of what we call today SaaS. So she is super smart and has a ton to tell us.
Let's get to it.
Well, I'm really excited, Carlos. How about you?
Yes, I am.
Because today, well, not live in our studio, but we can see her lovely face over Zoom. We have Georgiana Laudi, who is a longtime friend. Met Georgiana when I lived in Montreal many, many moons ago, and then you moved to Vancouver and back and forth. But some people listening to the podcast may not know who you are. They may have been living under a rock. Mm-hmm. So please, for the benefit of our audience, welcome.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
For sure, I will. I will assume that the vast majority of the people listening have no idea who I am, and that does not mean they're living under a rock. I've been in the marketing space for a really long time, maybe, almost 20 or so years. And I think, Tara, you and I probably met about 10 or so years ago. So I was doing more, and I air quote, traditional digital marketing prior to about 10 years ago, where I was doing SEO and content marketing and PPC and, that kind of social things like that. When about 10 or so years ago, I was introduced to this entirely different sort of business model, which is software as a service and SaaS. And I started working with, and they're, the majority of them were tech startups. So I got involved in the tech community, which is when I met you. And I just fell in love with that business model, the software as a service business model, because it is so tied to customer relationships. And so I thought that was a much more interesting way to approach marketing as opposed to just from an acquisition focus, which I'd been doing so far. And so I started working with these tech companies, these tech startups, and I just could not go back to any other type. I couldn't go back to working with traditional businesses after that, because I just love that business model. So that's what I've been doing for the past 10 or so years, is working with software as a service companies. And I went in-house at Unbounce, located in Vancouver, for about 5 years. And when I joined that team, I think I was employee number 15. And when I left, we were near 200.
Wow.
And so there was a big growth when I was there. In the first 3 years of my, tenure at the company, we grew revenue 900%. We were on the Deloitte Fast 50. We were on the top 10 fastest growing in Canada for sure. And it was just this crazy roller coaster ride. It was amazing. But after being there 5 years, 2 years ago, I left, and I have now gone to more advising similar companies to that. And so I still am totally in love with software as a service businesses, but now I work with them in more an advisor or sort of consultancy basis. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Very cool. So what is a software as a service business as compared to, is it just a
software
fancy word for B2B, or is it different than like Microsoft was back in the day? Like,
yeah, software as a service is like one way to describe it. You could also call it like cloud software, or you could also refer to it as like subscription business model. They're all very, very similar. When I think of B2B, I think of B2B as being like an umbrella that SaaS could fall under.
Right.
But B2B marketing implies so much more than just SaaS. I really like the SaaS business model because like I said, it's based on relationships, but it's mostly rooted in like the subscription model. So the idea is that this isn't about like a one-off purchase, which I realize even like more what you would think of as more traditional, like one-off businesses like e-commerce, for instance, their goal is to have a customer be repeat. But the sort of the anatomy of the business and the sort of MO of the business is a little bit different when you're on a subscription model than when you're doing something like e-commerce, because the relationship that you build with that customer is the lifeblood of your health as a business. So because software as a service businesses are based largely on like recurring revenue. So they base their success on monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. And it's all about having the longest possible relationship, the most loyal possible relationship with your customers. It is the lifeblood. Like you do not survive if you have a high churn meaning customers, maybe onboard into your tool and they're like, that's cool. But then a couple months later, they're like, meh, I can live without this. And they churn out of your product. And that's like the death of software. So that implies a lot of things for how what the business measures as, success. It implies a lot about how the teams are set up. It implies a lot about what marketing's role is in that, and what the sort of product development and the marketing relationship should look like. There's a lot of interdependencies there, obviously. And so there's, and because SaaS is absolutely exploding. So there's like, even just in the MarTech space,
which is marketing technology, for anybody that's listening who may not be familiar with the lingo.
Yeah. So MarTech, marketing technology, tools are one, piece of software as a service businesses. And I want to say there are 7,000 now, and only 5 years ago, there was something like 500.
7,000 tools.
7,000 different pieces of software, like different tools. Yeah. Products. Wow. So like HubSpot would fall into that. Pardot would fall into, they would fall under the marketing automation, space. But there's PPC software, there's social media software. MarTech is huge, obviously, by the fact that there are over 7,000 now, when only just a couple of years ago there were a few hundred. So the space is just exploding because of that, competition being more fierce, and there's more sort of businesses that exist, and there's people starting these types of businesses every day. How to sort of set up your team and think about your relationship with your customers is just, it's been in such high demand. And that's actually why I decided not to go back in-house after I left my VP marketing role at a tech company. I decided to not go back in-house because within like 20 minutes of an hour, I put on my personal Facebook that I was leaving my in-house role and that I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. 20 minutes later, my inbox totally exploded. And it was like job opportunities, like in-house opportunities, consulting opportunities. And I was like, oh man, this is just testament to the fact that it's a very young industry. It's quite a young industry in the grand scheme of things. And there are not a lot of people in that industry that can say they've been in it since the beginning. So I was kind of refer to myself as like, I got in very early.
Old school.
Yeah, in a very young sort of industry. And so I had this advantage of being very senior in a very young industry. So I was like, you know what? I can say yes to a lot more companies if I don't go back in-house. And honestly, like the whole thing just sort of fascinates me. And I love working with a variety of companies. And so I opted not to go back in-house. And so now I'm doing like advisory and consulting.
Cool. Well, let's talk about the audience for your clients, I guess now, and for SaaS, because you talk at like 7,000
And that's only
companies in MarTech.
Yeah.
What are some of the other categories, maybe?
Fintech, health, education.
But a lot of those would be also consumer-based, like more...
Some of them are consumer-based for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's not all B2B.
No, it's not all B2B.
But it's still under the SaaS umbrella?
Exactly.
No matter. Okay, wow, okay.
Yeah. QuickBooks is the easiest sort of example to think of. They've been around since day one. So Salesforce is another one. It's like that type of tool. So there's a lot of different categories. MarTech just happens to be the one that I am the closest to,
right?
And that I suspect has been growing at a faster rate than the others. But that I may be totally wrong on that, because fintech and edtech and even health tech is.
Yeah. I think if you start to focus in on those areas, you'd probably see explosions there too. Because like once you mentioned them, I was like, oh my god, yeah. And I think the big question I have, because as a consumer, especially of various different MarTech products, as well as I don't know, where would Slack, for instance, fit into the scheme of things?
That's a good question. I don't know where Slack would fall. I'm going to assume under like communication. So, that's like messaging. It doesn't fall under MarTech. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, we use a ton of different productivity tools as well. In the we use Harvest for time tracking and Xero for our accounting. I guess that's kind of fintech, and Slack. I mean, Carlos could probably give you the bill at the end of the month a little bit clearer. But it adds up after a while. So that 7,000 number kind of gets overwhelming. It's like, what do you pick that is
right?
Right for you? That's actually going to end up.
Well, I think we ran into the same issue when we were looking for an actual alternative to Harvest, and we didn't find the right solution. And I feel like every single piece of software now has become software as a service. You used to think of back in the day where you had to buy Windows 95, right?
Off
the shelf, right?
In a box.
Right. And now it's a
huge box with a few little diskettes.
And even Office, right?
And it was like $1,000 or something.
Yes. You'd buy Office, right? Whereas now I buy, you license it, at $5 a month per person, blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. So everything sort of becomes software as a service when it comes to professional and all these
and
industries.
That's recent. That's not, I mean, we can remember when that wasn't the way we purchased software. So that's why I always come back to this like explosion of this industry, not only in MarTech, but across the board, because it's a lot harder today than it was in 2009 or 2010 to acquire customers and retain those customers, because there are alternatives popping up every single day. And there's a lot of really innovative people solving the same problems in really innovative ways.
So on the audience side, though, I would imagine the explosion in general, like consultants and small businesses would also be part of what's leading to the growth. I mean, you would understand the audience for MarTech SaaS products more than anybody. Who are is the audience? Are we typical for the audience, or does the audience look different now than it did even 10 years ago?
So you mean the purchasers of
the customers, consumers, users, that sort of. I know there's different lingo for every.
Yeah. So like, who do the companies that I work with, if I'm working with a piece of marketing technology, who are they speaking to? It is a very, very wide range. So I personally love working with SaaS companies that serve the SMB market. Right. There's a reason for that, though, and the reason is rooted in the opportunity for growth of the product. So I don't tend to do a ton of B2C. I have worked with some B2C customers, like in fintech, but I really do love, and I've always loved, and this goes back to like my roots in marketing, that SMB market and sort of helping that small business be more successful and solve their own problems and not need to outsource to,
big firms,
hire or whatever, and just do things more efficiently and sort of educate in marketing and things like that, and help our MO as a marketing department inside of Unbounce was help marketers build better marketing experiences. That was what we were trying to do, was educate and be a resource for them in addition to being a tool that they use. So as I really love the SMB space. For that reason, they move quickly. They are very agile. They want to learn. They, can make purchasing decisions relatively quickly too. But they are also fickle at the same time, right? In that shiny object syndrome, we all suffer from it. And SMBs, I'm only thinking about in the MarTech. That's the lens for which I'm, describing this. But there are a lot of solutions popping up every day. And if next month you see a better solution to something like Harvest or whatever, marketing software that you're using, you might consider moving. And it's becoming easier and easier to do that. So you can jump from product to product or solution to solution relatively painlessly. The more sort of further down in the market you are, the further up in the market you are, the more complicated it is, right? There's more people involved. There's more, your tool stack's more complicated. Your CTO needs to get involved. There's the purchasing process is a lot more complicated. And so the change cost is a lot higher when you get into sort of enterprise level stuff.
Yeah.
So it runs the gamut. I would argue every business needs marketing. So every business is a potential customer of marketing technology. But I do really like the sort of sweet spot in the middle of that SMB space. It's a lower touch too. So you want to spend, as a software company, you want to spend as little as possible to acquire and onboard and engage a customer and to keep them, engaged and loyal and getting value from your product. And you can do that now in really sophisticated ways that don't involve or require like one-on-one onboarding or high-touch sales. So there's a lot of like really, really cool ways to onboard customers now, especially in the SMB space, that can cost software companies very little money once they've set it up. They just need to, make some smart decisions early on.
I would even say, from the perspective of being the buyer, of being the user of the software, if I run into a SaaS program that requires me to talk to somebody before I try it, I will shelve it unless I really, really need it, because I'm so used to, I've gotten so used to we can do a trial, whether it's free or paid. I don't, for me, it doesn't matter if I pay for a trial as long as it's not an incredible amount of money. But don't make me go through training sessions and many phone calls. I don't have time for that. What I want to do is I want to sign in. I want to see how it works. I want to maybe suck in some of the data. So for instance, with Harvest, it's time tracking. I would export from Harvest and import to this new tool to check it out, to see how it works.
Right.
If it seems like, I'll look at the things that bother me about what I'm currently using, what I want to be, what I want to find, test it out, and then I'm ready to make the switch. In that process, I don't talk to a single person, and I don't want to talk to a single person. The only time I do is if they don't offer a free trial and they can give me a demo. And the demo is then I don't want to sit and talk about our needs and then set up a demo. Just show me the damn demo. But maybe I'm not typical when it comes to SaaS.
I think you totally are. There's lots of reasons for demos and asking all those questions ahead of demos, especially when it gets to much more sophisticated software. Sales teams should not avoid asking those questions. Yeah. However, that said, because you fit into that SMB sort of bracket, you want to be low touch. You want to be able to self-serve and figure out whether or not this tool is something you want to use in the long term or not very, very quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of my time is actually spent helping to get enough customer insights into what that experience needs to look like, so that first value can be delivered like as soon as possible. No matter how simple or complicated the tool is, there is a fast track to showing value realization and showing that aha moment. And that's actually a lot of what I help companies do, especially, and this comes back to like the relationship of marketing with these products, because a lot of times a lot of software companies will reach out to me and say like, we need acquisition, we need signups. And actually what is happening is once somebody signs up, they have this terrible experience like you're describing, like, I don't want to talk to somebody, and they drop out. So they spent all this money to acquire this sign up, and then they can't even onboard that customer into the product and sort of give the customer what they need in order to see that value in the product. And then they lose them. And then all that money was spent for nothing. So typically what ends up happening is I'm like, okay, we can talk about acquisition in a second, but tell me a little bit about how you help these customers evaluate your tool, and how do you measure activation? So somebody goes through an onboarding experience to become activated, and then how are you measuring engagement, which means they've turned into like a lifer, and the chances of them churning drop down significantly. And defining activation and engagement is something that the majority of SaaS companies, unfortunately, like rarely have an answer for. They don't know what activation means. They don't know how they should be measuring that. And so typically what we do is we focus on customer research and doing at the very minimum surveys and some interviews to find out what do their best fit customers say motivated them to use their tool, and what does it let them do? What can they do now that they couldn't do before, and sort of pull that back into that early experience of the product, so that new people signing up are like, oh yes, this is exactly what I thought I was going to get, and now I'm in the product and now I get it. There's a lot of reasons why that wouldn't happen. It would, the team structure, just relying on the people to like figure out software on their own, or giving just a really poor early experience of the product. And so even before I will talk about acquisition or like building up, marketing strategies or launching campaigns, it's before we do invest in that sort of side of things, let's talk about your onboarding experience, so that we know once we do invest in eyeballs and branding, that you can actually acquire them as a happily paying customer and retain them as a happily paying customer. So marketing for this type of business is not about brand awareness, or it's not about awareness building only. It is also about helping customers see value, and then helping retain those customers, and then even potentially build upon those customers and expand how those customers are using the tool by adding users within the company, or upgrading their account, or adding a high value add-on, or there's a lot of ways to sort of expand an account. But marketing inside these environments are not just focused on awareness, they're focused on the entire thing, which is why I was like, yes, this is the marketing that I want to do, because I didn't want to stop at awareness building. And I love post-acquisition marketing and customer marketing. It's just super fun and innovative, and it's still changing, and I'm learning new stuff all the time. So it's a cool place to hang out, in my opinion.
Yeah. Just one comment before the next question. We're by no means experts in your area. Our stuff is more in the retention side of things, retention and loyalty building, a little bit of referral creation. So they have to get through your side of it in order to even get there in the first place. However, I'm constantly surprised at when we talk to clients or potential clients, and they haven't even QA'd their site, which is, for those listening, is like a question and answer, sort of like somebody comes to your site and you observe them going through things and what route they take and what questions they have and where they get stuck and where they drop off. It goes beyond looking at your Google Analytics, and they don't even realize that when somebody comes to their site, they're not finding answers to that question that they have like right away. So they're bouncing, not like, and they'd be perfectly great customers for them. They're like actually right in their target, but you haven't even put on your homepage what you do. You have like some fancy marketing message that like is like so obscure.
Save time and money.
Yeah. It's like, whoa.
Yes.
They all save time and money.
And you're like, I'm just looking for something to send my email newsletter on through, and it's like,
yeah. And that's that customer research too, is to get to that, the meat of that struggle of why somebody seeks out a solution like yours to begin with. So I've recently, like in the past couple of years, have fallen in love with the Jobs to Be Done framework, which is essentially, I'm never going to do this justice because I'm not like a foremost authority on Jobs to Be Done at all, but I just really love applying jobs to marketing because it helps you sort of look for like the job statement is, and a typical Jobs to Be Done statement would be, the idea is customers hire you to do a job for them. And there's tons of reading to be done on this. And it's really, really interesting for anyone who's, wants to go down that rabbit hole. There's some really, really interesting resources for that I can maybe put in the show notes that might be interesting, but it's a nice way to think about customers in this statement, which is when I struggle or situation they're in, I want to, which is their top motivations, so I can, whatever desired outcome is. And so it's like it's like a Mad Libs, like fill in the blank of struggled situation, top motivations, and desired outcome. And if you can get that information about your customers, about your best fit customers, not people necessarily shopping, but those who have been your customers for a long time and get a ton of value out of you. This is obviously additionally important in a subscription model because those customers that are willing to pay for a long time and stay a customer for a long time, being your best fit customers, if you can find out from them what it was that led them to seek a solution like yours, what their top motivations were for finding this solution and what they needed to see, and then what they can do now that they weren't able to do before. If you can find that out about your best fit customers, you can retrofit that back to your website, to your onboarding, or evaluation phase. You can apply that to sales. You can apply that to, anything, but you can also apply it to post-acquisition messaging as well inside your app, or, as customer marketing following that, engagement phase.
Yeah, it was I think I heard a stat somewhere that if the customers that are least likely to churn are the ones that are coming back to your tool pretty much every day and using it every day. Right. And they're using it every day or very frequently because like it's become part of their daily routine. They can't don't even know how to live without it. So they're not going to go and seek out anything else unless you do something really heinous.
Yeah. I think Slack's sort of the perfect example. It's essentially replaced, email, for a lot of us, but we still use email. And, when Slack's down, it's almost like, oh, we can't get fire. Work done. Yeah. It's like, what do you mean? Email's still there.
We survived before, but now we can't any longer.
Exactly. Right. So,
right. Yeah, and the comment that you were making before, Tara, about not wanting like the evaluation when you're evaluating a software and not wanting to necessarily like talk to somebody. There's a study, I believe it was from Zendesk, but it's like 53% of customers expect to be able to resolve their own problems, and they don't actually want to speak to anybody. And that number rises to 60% for those aged 18 to 34.
Right. Yeah.
And then Gartner additionally is saying that by 2020, 85% of customers are going to expect like no one-to-one at all and to be able to completely self-serve.
Yeah, don't make me talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think like there's a school of thought which is a little bit anti-sales led, which is product led. And so if you can sort of lead with how your product is going to solve solve problems and let the product sort of speak for itself, as opposed to needing a high touch sales cycle or high touch sales experience, that company like Slack is really, really well served because it costs very little to acquire a new customer and to onboard that new customer. Slack is one of the best examples of seamless onboarding. Like when you first sign up for Slack, I happen to know this because I read an AMA by Mercy Grace, who actually built the early onboarding experience. It was like 4 steps. Within 4 steps of signing up, you should get to your first sort of value realization, and you do with Slack. It's very, very easy to be like, oh yeah, I can totally see how this would be valuable. I can totally see why I should add my team to this. They are one of the best examples of doing that really, really well.
I'll have to look that article up. We'll put it in the show notes as well. But talk about the value realization, because I think that's a really important concept that is probably core to everything that you're doing. But a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it means different things depending on your business and obviously your business, but from software to software too, it'll be totally different depending on what your solution is and how, are you a best in class solution, or are you an all-in-one? That'll look very, very different. So value realization, or actually what I should probably talk about is that activation and engagement piece as being often left out. So the 4 steps I was describing for Slack, for example, you would sign up for Slack. So you're like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And then between signing up and actually being like, oh yeah, this is going to work for me. I can work with this. This is going to be great. Knowing what the sign of you saying this is going to be great is critical to their success. Them being able to measure when you have that moment in your head is what they will base every decision on, what that experience from sign up to activation looks like, right? So like, How many emails should they send? What should the experience in app look like? What messaging should they use? And they'll test and iterate and do all kinds of things between that website sign up and that activation moment in order to shorten it and optimize it and make it as easy and seamless as possible. But being able to measure when somebody becomes activated within your product is something that, like I was saying before, far, far too few software companies actually measure that, or they'll make it like, so in the example, an Unbounce example, which would be easy. So Unbounce is, my example is the landing page software. So it was the landing page software first. Now it does a little bit more. But in that example, if you're signing up for a landing page software, publishing a landing page or building a landing page, some companies might say like, okay, well, that's it. They built a landing page. Cool. They're activated. That means they're our customer now. But actually that's not enough. Or even worse, they entered their credit card. Okay, great. They're a customer now. That's even worst case scenario than that. So what we did was they published a minimum of 2 pages. They ran a minimum amount of traffic to that page, and they turned on a minimum amount of integrations with other tools. And that was how we knew that they saw value realization, or that they got to first value within the tool. It's not the ultimate value of the tool. There's a lot more to be gained from using a software like that. But we knew that's how we could measure what somebody being successful in the product in an early version looks like. So that's how we would measure activated. And then engagement is another thing, which actually relates to what you were saying before about like, if somebody logs into your product every day, that's a sign that they've hit engagement, and the likelihood that they will churn is much lower. Right. The only pushback on that I would make is that daily use of a product depending on the product, doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's engaged. And it would be easy. And I think a lot of software companies do say like, oh, weekly active accounts or daily active accounts means they're engaged, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. But regular, prolonged, continuous use is generally like the goal to get to with your customers.
Yeah, well, I would say like, and sorry for Harvest, because I've used Harvest for a long time and I do really like it. It's just like, and they're very good at what they do, but then there's certain things as we grow, we need more of, but that's a whole other story. But that's what I would say about a tool like Harvest is we've been activated for a long time. We use it every day, but we use it. It's not really about.
We love it.
Being engaged.
Oh yeah, it's also a time tracking tool. It's not the most fun thing to do.
No, but there are ways. I think there's an opportunity there to create a time tracking tool that is more engaging and life-changing in a lot of ways. And if you can get him to track time, Carlos here to track time,
but I would say
you're
like
going to win that market.
A gamified talk.
Oh yeah, he would. Oh, there we go. And time tracking is really important in a lot of industries too. I think a lot of people forget this.
What I like about the whole SaaS thing and what you've been talking about over the last few minutes, 30 minutes is how much more feedback you get, right? Like one of the most frustrating things as I grew up in the marketing world, just like you, is just like, oh, launch campaign, we're done. Oh, report on impressions, we're done.
Exactly.
Right. And it's sort of like, okay, well, what really happened? And often, from an agency perspective, often the client didn't share anything. And you're like, well, how are we supposed to like really improve things? And, we can improve things from an ad perspective, but we don't never, and then again, like the conversion stuff, like you said, it's like, yeah, they gave us a credit card, but they stay customers after that. Right.
Yeah.
So I love
Well,
that.
the harvest example is a great one in that, like, I would hope that Harvest has some sort of indicator that will show them within the tool, to your point, Carlos, that like they can see, looks like something's happening here. Like more and more employees maybe are like not tracking their time all of a sudden, or some sort of pattern that emerges where there's an early indication of like potential churn, and they can get ahead of it and maybe, I don't know, get on the phone with you or roll something out to you or suggest that you use the tool in XYZ way, is a way to get ahead of that. Or if you cancel, then asking you what happened and really getting that feedback and not just letting you leave without finding out exactly what it was that, like, I don't know, made you get sort of bored with it or didn't feel innovative anymore, didn't work with you or whatever. But yes, you totally have that opportunity in software to watch as people are using the tool and get like indicators of whether or not what you're doing is working. It's very gratifying in that way for sure.
You're making me realize there's a great example of one that I'm using right now that is just a horrible follow-up. The software itself is fine, but the onboarding was horrible, and the sort of the follow-up and sort of like any sort of like troubleshooting where I would hit a roadblock has been horrible. But unfortunately, it's a software that we kind of need. It's our payroll software. And, when it comes to payroll, or you deal with a small software startup, or you deal with like the behemoth ADP, that is ADP that costs a fortune, right? And I had sort of that firsthand, I had that firsthand experience where something didn't work, asked a question, they literally like didn't respond to my question and almost treated me like I was dumb. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I complained to the company that referred them and said, this looks bad on you guys because you're partnering with these people and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so
I can wager what's going on in that team.
Yeah.
And what the structure of that company looks like in terms of how the teams are set up and who has the loudest voice at the table.
So who do you think
leadership team meeting? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Who do you think has the loudest voice at the table? It's so great that you would like have that insight into, this is a problem and this is usually where it stems from. Because this takes me to another topic, which I think is really relevant. So in a past podcast, we talked to a really brilliant woman who, I don't know if you've come across her, met her, or you definitely should meet her. Her name is Tracy Chong, and she's behind Strata Insights. And Strata Insights, they do brand economics valuations. Okay. And what I love about what they do, and probably similar to like what you go into an organization and say is like, this is very little to do with marketing. Right? It's like, or is in marketing as you think. So your brand is losing customers, or your growth is slowed, or retention is dismal, or whatever. It has very little to do with marketing. You keep pointing your finger and throwing insults at marketing for not doing their job, but marketing's doing their job. The problem is we talked about this earlier, either the product falls down at some level, or something happens where you need customer service and that falls apart. Yeah. Perhaps there's something even outside, right? Your company has bad press, or maybe there's an incoming company to the market that's disrupting it, that's like doing a better job. And I was thinking, like, even your customers and them, not being there yet. And I was thinking about early days of Slack wasn't as simple as it is now. Sure. Early days of Slack, I remember several companies that I tried to get Slack going in, and people were like, they wouldn't use it. They wouldn't turn it on. They wouldn't engage with it. And it would just end up sort of going dormant. So we never got to that stage where we upgraded because we wanted to keep it around and keep the history, because nobody was engaging at that level. And we'd end up giving up and going back to email and chit chat in the office. So, but now Slack it's gotten to the point where it's pretty commonplace. So that's also a factor, right? You got
so many layers to that.
Yeah. So there's like so much going on when it comes to this. And so in your day-to-day life as a growth marketer, what are all the things that you do, think of, take into account, try to affect?
Yeah. How do I even
start? Yeah.
How do I tackle this? Like I said, typically when companies reach out to me, because I have this marketing title just sort of latched onto the side of me, and it's going to carry around. And not that I don't love marketing, I totally love marketing, but marketing within this environment means a very, very different thing. So I've now sort of resigned to marketing and growth, because within a SaaS environment, particularly within a tech environment, a lot of it is about growth. But a series that I launched, so I'm not really sure the best way to sort of tackle the answer, like how to tackle your question. But yeah, so one of the things that I realized soon after like leaving my in-house role was the marketing girl, or
putting up air quotes for those of you that are listening.
Yeah, sorry. So like companies would reach out and they'd say, we need marketing. And I'd say, okay, so who's in charge of marketing? Well, me, the founder would say. Yeah. Well, do you have a marketer? Yeah, we got a marketer, but like I'm in charge of marketing. I'm like, okay. And that marketer was really sort of set up to fail, in that they're an order taker for the most part, and they're being tasked with only acquisition or awareness focused marketing. And so they're like running the blog, or they're running social, or they are building sales collateral, things like that, sort of at the service to the sales team, if there is a sales team, or just doing awareness type marketing. And that founder's like, we need more marketing. Like, it's not working. And so to your point about like, well, your website, does this marketer have any way to influence what's happening on your website? Well, no, product owns the website, or engineering owns the website. So that marketer can't touch the website, even though for that marketer, I want to say her performance is largely based on the ability of the website to convert visitors into signups. Right. And her hands are completely tied because she can't influence the website, because that can't be it. It's got to be, we need more traffic, or there's got to be something else, or we got to run some ads, we got to do XYZ thing on the front end.
Better traffic. You need to find better traffic.
Better traffic, exactly. Yeah, which would work if the website could convert them, right? Yeah. And so there's a huge disconnect in an environment like that between marketing and product, and CS for that matter. So customer success in the middle of that as well. Like, there's got to be a really tight connection between marketing, customer success, and product. Where marketing ends and customer success begins doesn't even really matter, as long as they know. That's the most important part of it, because customer success largely does customer marketing. I would consider onboarding, emails, an in-app onboarding experience as customer marketing. That is something that product teams, so Carlos, to your point about like, it's a great software, but like I couldn't, the experience layer on top of that software was just missing. And that's because the product team or the engineering team is like, no, the product speaks for itself. build it and they will come.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need that. And so this whole like growth concept is like connecting all of those dots so that marketing stands a chance at having the all the work they do at bringing eyeballs and traffic to the website has a chance at getting them through and signed up, and then either marketing or customer success has a chance of onboarding them and provides that customer experience layer on top of the product that may or may not influence the product roadmap, and that doesn't even matter, but there does need to be an experience outside and above the sort of product. And I do a lot of customer experience mapping that is like super core to what I do when I work with a company is like, okay, let's find out about your customers and what keeps them up at night and why they're struggling and what leads them to, seek a solution and what all the stuff I was talking about before. But also what is what's your vision for this company? What do you stand for as a brand? What is what gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets the team excited every day? Where's your product headed? What's your sort of vision for where the company is headed, and the product roadmap, for example, would fall into that. And then, what are we currently doing today? And can we design a customer experience layer, which customer experience is, for the uninitiated, is essentially like everything your customer experiences inside of the product, outside of the product, whether it's talking to your customer success team or whether or not it's like, importing a CSV into the back end of your product, that all has to do with your customer experience. And so taking, designing what good looks like for your best customers and having, solving for that either in your product in some ways or maybe in emails in some ways or some sort of messaging to help people connect the dots and sort of identify what your customers' success milestones are. Sorry, I'm like waving my hands around, which is
it's great. Good. Yeah. Nobody can see it.
Not important, but identifying your customers' success milestones in their relationship with you is critical because it will let you basically operationalize customer insight. So if you can learn about your customers and you can turn it into a customer experience map of what good looks like, then you can mobilize your team to build those experiences and sort of get out of their way and provide that low touch, not needing a one-on-one or, giving people what they want when they want it before they know they want it kind of experience, is being able to operationalize those customer insights with the success milestones, filling any success gaps they might have, measuring success in a meaningful way. So not credit card entered, which is a business metric, but an actual success milestone of like activated or, became engaged or whatever with your product. So that's a lot of what I end up doing.
Yeah. And I feel like by the time they get to our stage or whatever, that's, definitely I love this whole customer success milestones. Now, mapping that out's got to be quite complicated. And you mostly map them out. Do you use analytics at all, or do you mostly map them out through interviews with customers, or a combination of both? Or is there tools that you would recommend or anything like that?
So all of the above, except for the tools that I would recommend. The tools are...
You should build one.
Yeah. I have thought about it, but it's possible. It's a bit of there's like a design sort of process, like big squiggly line, big messy. Yep. It's actually on my Twitter profile right now. It's behind me. It's like the background photo, because it really, customer experience mapping can feel a lot like this Damien Rice design process, squiggly line to like a nice, clear sort of path, because there's a lot that goes into a customer experience map, but as you sort of define your customer success milestones, it becomes a lot easier. So if you can figure out what leaps of faith, so to speak, your customer goes through in their relationship with you, it might be like getting to your website might be a leap of faith. Signing up and deciding to try the damn thing might be a leap of faith, activating and so forth. So it's not actually that complicated, because a lot of, especially software as a service, have very similar customer journey maps, but their customers are doing slightly different things at each of these success milestones. So
different jobs to be done.
So the jobs to be done becomes part of it. So I actually use jobs to be done to define my customer journey maps. And I sort of layer it on top of. But for every success milestone that I can identify in a customer's relationship, I will think through what people are doing, thinking, and feeling. So what they're doing is like, it might be they're visiting my website. It might be they're having a conversation with their colleague. It might be they're calling their CTO. It might be, any number of things that they are doing. They might be, on your social media profiles. They might be in a help center. Or they might be reading, whatever. So all the things that they're doing, whether or not inside or outside of your product, what they're thinking. So their motivations and objections. So, what do they need to see at each given stage? What might push back against them? Maybe an economic buyer or a technical buyer could potentially influence a certain stage. And then what are they feeling, which is sort of their like emotional map. So that you can, knowing where they are sort of emotionally for each of these stages of the customer experience with you, you can sort of make sure that you're speaking to that and addressing them in a more meaningful way with your voice and tone and your messaging, depending on which stage of the relationship they're in. Right. With you.
So feelings like would be sort of like frustrated, confused, exactly. But they could also be like elated.
Mm-hmm. Elated, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I love using like an emotional journey map across the customer journey map, because anybody looking at your customer journey within your team, when I say anybody, I mean like your team looking at this thing, they sort of instantly can get a grasp of like where your customer's head is at when they're making a certain decision. So you can make a lot more strategic decisions about what you do to solve for a specific customer milestone when you are in their head and understand what's motivating them, what they might be getting pushback about, how they might be feeling and where they might be making these decisions and thinking about, whether or not they should like take that leap to the next step in their relationship with you. So it just lets you be way more focused and strategic about what you do at each of these stages, which is why I love doing customer experience maps with companies, because it helps basically operationalize, like I said before, that customer insight. So the team, marketing, customer success, product, anybody really, sales, can zero in on what they're solving for in a much more meaningful way instead of looking at MQL and SQL.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think when you're just talking about that, I was thinking about my experience with Typeform, which is a really great way to put together surveys, et cetera. It's not like page. It actually helps you create this wonderful survey format that makes it enjoyable for somebody to go through. Sometimes like
built in.
And it builds trust too, because quite often you're asking people by the end, you're like, give me all your demographic data and then now your email. You're asking for a lot of information. So if you build that trust, and they actually help you build that trust into it, as well as in their platform, they seem to get into your head as somebody who's doing surveys as well.
Yeah, Typeform's a really interesting example, and I've spoken to the marketing team there before. They have a very flat or sort of horizontal market, right? Because they serve everyone. Yeah. Unlike Harvest, who has a very clearly defined persona and customer, Typeform is in a very, very, very different scenario in that they have to speak to a very specific pain. So frameworks like Jobs to Be Done is really, really valuable with a tool like, or particularly valuable for a tool like Typeform, for example, so they can zero in on a very specific use case for how their tool might be used, as opposed to being like, okay, we want all accountants to use Typeform now. Mm-hmm. That's a terrible example.
Yeah. Well, and quite often. Yeah. And I mean, we could go on and on about like not targeting your market based on very like crazily old-fashioned demographics or job titles, that it really is more about motivations, the jobs to be done. Really, like, I have this issue, I have this problem, and I need this is how I need to solve it, or I need to solve it, and this is like what outcome I need. I really like, and I do like the jobs to be done framework as well. This my mind is like full of like information, plus I have more questions, but I don't want to make this too long. I think people should come follow you if they want to hear more about the amazing stuff that you do. You also have a really cool site called Forget the Funnel.
Right, which is what I wanted to mention before. That's right. I was going to talk about that series as like how I wanted to solve for that like first marketer at that very product first company. So thank you for bringing that up. Forget the Funnel, weekly workshop series intended for in-house marketers at SaaS companies who need to be thinking more strategically, who are just, being fed tactic after tactic, especially top down from maybe some stakeholders, and really want to be thinking more strategically. That was the intention for that series. And it's for in-house marketers. However, a lot of founders and even marketers with clients also attend those. So that season kicks off very soon, so it should be in spring by the time this year.
Well, I know that I took the time a little while back to watch the analytics one with what's her name?
Dana DiTomaso.
Yes. Oh my God.
Canadian.
I have that bookmarked, and it exploded my brain as far as like how to restructure analytics. I sent it to our content optimization specialist here, and he took that and then he ran with it a little bit even further. Now he's setting up all sorts of different instances of Google Analytics, and like,
so great. Yeah.
I feel like we've just gone next level, and thank you for that. So yeah, definitely check out Forget the Funnel. Sign up for everywhere that Georgiana lives.
We'll put the links in the show
It's
notes.
GGIIAA on Twitter. You have a lot of great stuff that you put.
Poor decision-making skills.
You know what? I find it easy to remember.
Really? My first name was available when I signed up, and I was like,
well, so was mine. And I went with Miss Rogue because that's where I was everywhere. And then, anyways, that's a whole other. We were in a different era where we were trying to be cute about our usenames. Yeah, exactly. Why would you use our real name? That's because
nobody took Twitter seriously. Well, nobody took Twitter seriously in 2008. It's not that I didn't take it seriously, but it was a different decision-making frame.
Well, and also I took it seriously, but it was kind of like, hey, when you're an old school internet person, if you agree or not with this, that using your real name was lame.
Yes.
Plus, it was always felt like a bit of a, you played a character online a little bit. There was a security risk in it.
Yeah, an anonymity thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So everybody had some sort of handle online. And so as we came into this new, brave new public social world, which by the way, that was a hard transition for me because I was so used to some level of being able to be, and my moniker is Miss Rogue. I was I look back at my stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, I was not I was the worst of me. And so Miss Rogue then
it was really a different era.
It was a different era, but it was it allowed you to say what you needed to say, what you couldn't say when you were offline and stuff. And anyways, right. All that being said, we all picked, I know that I picked, and a lot of people that I know have picked names that weren't our own for a reason, even though we were early adopters on these platforms.
Super silly. I know. I regret it every day.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Georgiana. We'll put all the show notes in the description.
It's been so amazing.
This has been amazing discussion.
Thanks. That was awesome. That was so fun. I can definitely talk about this all day long. So
yeah. Well, it was super valuable.
Cool.
So big thank you to Georgiana for joining us on the podcast. She's so full of knowledge and so much experience that it's just amazing.
I'm thinking about marketing in a whole new way after that. So yes, thank you so much. We're going to have a whole bunch of links in the show notes.
Make sure you check her out at Forget the Funnel. And don't forget, if you're enjoying our podcast, give us a review on Apple Podcasts because that's the one that counts. Subscribe to us on whatever podcast you're playing. Share us with one of your colleagues that would really benefit this.
Or if you have more, you can also do that.
Yeah, but people share less these days. And we know that podcasts are very much a word of mouth medium. And we've gotten some awesome feedback from very random people that just, reached out to us. So it's just great to hear from everybody.
And we have a lot more mind-blowing guests coming up on analytics, on AR in marketing, like all sorts of really cool stuff to discuss.
Awesome. See you soon.
Talk to you soon.